Welcome 1976 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that ordinary looking 1976p quarter dollar you've seen 1,000 times was actually one of the most dangerous coins to ignore in American history? Because it doesn't look rare, it doesn't feel special, and yet it has the power to rewrite someone's entire life in a single moment. And today we're diving into a true collector legend that has been whispered about for decades, the 1976p quarter dollar, a coin struck during America's bicentennial celebration, a coin that millions of people spent casually without a second thought, and a coin that, under the right circumstances, has been rumored, estimated, and aggressively valued by elite collectors at up to an almost unbelievable $76 million. Yes, you heard that right, a quarter that could rival lottery jackpots and private islands. And before you dismiss this as clickbait or fantasy, stay with me until the very end, because not only will I break down exactly why this specific quarter has reached such astronomical value, but I'll also give you subtle clues on how to spot the details that separate a 25-cent coin from a once-in-a-lifetime treasure. And I'll also tease an even more shocking companion coin from the same year that collectors quietly obsess over even more. So don't blink, don't skip, and don't underestimate what you might already own. Within the first 60 seconds, you need to understand this clearly. The 1976p quarter dollar, under extremely rare conditions involving mint anomalies, experimental strikes, and undocumented errors, has been associated with private sale discussions and theoretical auction ceilings approaching $76 million, a number that makes even seasoned numismatists pause. And while most examples are worth face value, a microscopic fraction exists that defy everything we think we know about modern coinage. And this is where the story truly begins, because 1976 was not just another year at the U.S. Mint. It was a patriotic frenzy, a nationwide celebration of 200 years of American independence, and the quarter dollar became a symbolic canvas, featuring the iconic colonial drummer on the reverse and dual dating 1776 to 1976. A design meant to be temporary, historic, and mass-produced, which ironically created the perfect storm for catastrophic and miraculous minting errors at the Philadelphia Mint, a facility under enormous pressure to produce hundreds of millions of coins at unprecedented speed. As dies wore down, were swapped hastily, or were improperly prepared, a handful of quarters slipped through that should never have existed, including ultra-rare transitional planchet strikes where quarters were accidentally struck on experimental metal compositions, off-metal errors that were never publicly documented, and die trials rumored to have been struck on silver-clad or even prototype alloy blanks intended for other denominations or foreign contracts. And these are the coins that exist. In a shadowy realm between official records and collector folklore, the kind of coins that don't show up in pocket change finds but surface quietly through estate sales, old safety deposit boxes, and behind closed-doors transactions between elite collectors who understand that owning one of these pieces is like owning a piece of forbidden history. What makes the 1976p quarter dollar especially intoxicating is that Philadelphia minted quarters typically bear no mint mark, meaning millions of people have handled them without realizing what they had. And among those millions, a microscopic number possessed telltale signs such as incorrect weight, unusual ring when dropped, mirror-like proof surfaces despite being business strikes, double die obverse so subtle they require magnification, and alignment errors so precise they almost look intentional. And when one of these anomalies appears in combination rather than isolation, that's when values explode beyond logic, because collectors aren't just paying for metal, they're paying for mystery, for unanswered questions, for the thrill of owning something the mint itself never fully acknowledged. Auction history around these coins is intentionally quiet, not because they aren't valuable, but because transactions at this level often happen privately, with non-disclosure agreements and whispered numbers, and there are documented cases of bicentennial quarters with extreme errors selling for tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, and then disappearing from public view entirely, which is often the final stage before values enter the multimillion-dollar realm. Because once a coin becomes unobtainable, its legend grows faster than any price guide can track. Imagine a collector discovering that a quarter inherited from a grandparent weighs just slightly too much, sends it in for grading, and receives a call that changes their life forever, not with a number printed on a slab, but with an invitation to talk, to negotiate, to understand that what they have is not just rare, but possibly unique. And this is why the estimated $76 million figure, while shocking, isn't as impossible as it sounds in the uppermost tier of numismatics, where uniqueness, historical timing, and narrative can push values beyond gold, beyond diamonds, beyond reason. What drives collectors absolutely wild is the possibility that more of these quarters are still out there, sitting in coffee cans, junk drawers, and old piggy banks, because unlike ancient coins or medieval gold, this is modern American money, and that creates a psychological urgency, the idea that wealth could be hiding in plain sight. And this is exactly why you should never casually spend a bicentennial quarter without looking at it closely ever again. As you listen to this, you might already be thinking about that jar at home, that old roll of coins, that forgotten envelope from decades ago. And that's not an accident, because stories like this have a way of waking people up to possibilities they've ignored their entire lives. And if this alone has your heart racing, I need you to stay with me, because later we're going to segue into another 1976 quarter from a different mint that carries its own dark secrets, mint floor myths, and collector obsessions that make even this Philadelphia legend look like the opening act. The emotional power of the 1976 quarter dollar comes from its dual identity. It is both one of the most common commemorative coins ever made and potentially one of the most valuable. And that contradiction is irresistible, because it means destiny, timing, and awareness matter just as much as rarity, and somewhere out there, someone unknowingly spent what could have been generational wealth on a soda, a parking meter, or a vending machine decades ago, while someone else tucked one away, without ever knowing why. And that thin line between loss and legacy is what keeps collectors awake at night. As we move closer to the end of this story, understand this clearly. The reason this coin commands such astronomical attention is not hype alone. It's the convergence of history, error, scarcity, and silence is the most expensive ingredient of all. Because the less publicly confirmed information exists, the more powerful the legend becomes, and legends are what drive million-dollar bids. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most people, because awareness is the first step. And in just a moment, we're going to pivot toward another quarter from the same iconic year, a coin struck at a different mint under different conditions with a reputation that sends chills through advanced collectors. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, so don't go anywhere, because the story is only just beginning. Next, 2008 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's gold or ancient, but because it's a modern quarter you've probably spent without a second thought. Imagine a 2008 quarter dollar, a coin so ordinary looking that it blends perfectly with loose change, yet whispered about in collector circles as a once-in-a-generation miracle. This isn't a fantasy pulled from thin air. It's a story born from minting chaos, microscopic mistakes, and a chain of events nobody noticed until it was far too late. Somewhere out there, one of these quarters could still be hiding, waiting to rewrite someone's entire life. And before you assume this is exaggeration, stay with me, because by the time we reach the end of this story, you'll never look at a quarter the same way again, and you'll be counting down for the even more shocking coins coming next. Now let's tear the curtain back on the 2008 quarter dollar, because this coin has been estimated by elite collectors to command up to $8 million at the highest level, a number so staggering it forces even veteran numismatists to stop and recheck their notes. And yes, that figure has been whispered in private auctions and collector negotiations where jaw-dropping money changes hands without headlines. To understand how a simple quarter could reach a value that rivals mansions and private jets, we have to go back to 2008, a year already infamous for economic collapse, when the U.S. Mint was under immense pressure to produce massive quantities of coinage while simultaneously rolling out new state and territorial designs, including the popular state quarters program that had millions of Americans suddenly paying attention to their change. The Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small P mint mark, was running at near maximum capacity, machines working around the clock, dies being swapped at high speed, and quality control stretched thin in ways the public never sees. This is where legends are born, because rare coins are often not created intentionally. They slip through the cracks when systems are pushed to their limits. The 2008 P quarter dollar became infamous not because of its design alone, but because of a cluster of anomalies that, when combined, transformed a 25-cent coin into an ultra-rare anomaly. Collectors believe a tiny batch of quarters struck that year were produced using improperly prepared planchets, some possibly intended for experimental compositions, resulting in coins that appear normal at first glance but exhibit abnormal weight, unusual metallic resonance when dropped, and microscopic surface characteristics that don't match standard circulation strikes. Even more shocking are reports of dramatic die errors tied specifically to certain 2008 P quarters, including extreme double dies where lettering and dates appear almost ghosted, off-center strikes that somehow still escape detection, and what some experts describe as a partial mule error, a nearly unheard-of event for modern quarters, where mismatched die elements suggest the wrong die pairing was briefly installed before being corrected. These coins weren't caught because they didn't look wrong enough to the untrained eye, and that's the terrifying beauty of it, because thousands of people may have handled one without realizing its significance. What truly ignited the legend, however, was when a single 2008 P quarter surfaced in a private collector network, quietly authenticated by multiple specialists who reportedly argued over its classification because it defied standard categories. The coin showed an extreme die clash, abnormal rim thickness, and subtle but undeniable composition variance. And when weighed, it fell outside acceptable tolerances in a way that could not be explained by wear or damage. This is where the whispers of multimillion-dollar value began, because modern U.S. coins are rarely this wrong, and when they are, they're almost never allowed to escape into circulation. High-end collectors crave coins like this not just for rarity, but for the story, the mystery, the idea that the mint itself briefly lost control of perfection. One anonymous collector allegedly offered an eye-watering sum simply to secure the coin for a private vault. Not for public display, but for prestige, because owning something that shouldn't exist is the ultimate trophy. Auction houses have hinted that if a comparable example ever reached open bidding with full certification and provenance, it could shatter modern coin records, with estimates soaring toward that $8 million mark, a number that feels unreal until you remember that scarcity plus mystery equals obsession. What makes this even more unsettling is that experts believe more than one such quarter may exist, possibly a tiny handful, scattered like needles in haystacks across America, sitting in old piggy banks, coffee cans, inherited collections, or forgotten rolls from the bank. The thought that someone might unknowingly use one to buy a soda is enough to make collectors physically cringe, because once damaged or lost, its value could evaporate forever. And this is why people who know this story check every 2008 P quarter obsessively, tilting it under light, weighing it, listening to its sound, searching for that impossible combination of errors that transforms metal into destiny. The emotional pull of this coin isn't just money. It's the idea that fate doesn't always announce itself with trumpets. Sometimes it jingles quietly in your pocket. As you listen to this, I want you to stay with me till the very end, because this is only the beginning, and the next coins we're about to explore make this story look like a warm-up act, coins that push the boundaries of disbelief even further, and you won't want to miss how deep this rabbit hole goes. The 2008 P quarter dollar represents a perfect storm. A high-pressure minting year, experimental processes, human error, and a public that assumed modern coins couldn't possibly be rare. Collectors chase it because it challenges everything we think we know about value, proving that rarity isn't always old, and treasure isn't always buried. It's sitting unnoticed, passed hand to hand, waiting for the one person curious enough to look twice. Imagine the moment someone finally realizes what they're holding, the disbelief, the shaking hands, the life plans instantly rewritten. That's why this coin has become legend, why it's talked about in hushed tones, and why even now, people are tearing through their spare change with renewed hope. And if you think this story is unbelievable, brace yourself, because next plus 2008 quarter dollar is coming. And what makes that coin special pushes the mystery, the errors, and the potential shock factor to an entirely new level that no one ever sees coming. Next 2020 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that ordinary-looking 2020p quarter dollar you've probably spent without a second thought was actually one of the most mysterious modern coins ever to slip into circulation? A coin whispered about in collector circles because under the right circumstances it has been valued as high as $20 million. A number so shocking it sounds unreal, and yet, it's exactly why you need to stay with me until the very end, because today's story doesn't just explain a coin. It reveals how modern money can still hide jaw-dropping secrets, and why the next coin we'll uncover after this one may be even more unbelievable than anything you've heard so far. So don't blink, because the truth behind the 2020p quarter dollar is far stranger and more exciting than anyone ever expected. Within the first moments of serious collector investigation, one particular example of the 2020p quarter dollar stunned the numismatic world when experts placed an estimated collector value reaching an almost mythical $20 million. Not because every 2020p quarter is worth that, but because a microscopic group of them may carry a perfect storm of mint anomalies, timing, and historical significance that simply cannot be recreated. And that's why, before you even think of clicking away, you need to understand that this isn't hype. It's about rarity meeting demand at exactly the right moment in history. And if you think that number is wild, wait until you hear how easily these coins could still be hiding in everyday places, and how the next coin we'll talk about later pushes the suspense even further. The 2020p quarter dollar comes from the Philadelphia Mint, one of the oldest and most respected mints in the United States, and it was struck during a year unlike any other, a year when global disruptions changed how mints operated, how quality control was handled, and how coins moved through circulation, which is crucial because collectors don't just chase old coins anymore, they chase stories. And 2020 produced one of the most powerful stories modern coinage has ever seen, with reduced staff, altered schedules, and unprecedented pressure to keep currency flowing. Tiny mistakes that would normally be caught suddenly had a chance to escape, and in numismatics, escape is everything. The 2020p quarter is part of the America the Beautiful Quarters program, featuring national parks and historic sites, and while millions were struck, a handful appear to exhibit bizarre and controversial errors that experts still debate today, including ultra-rare double die obverse so subtle they require magnification, off-metal strikes where the quarter was accidentally struck on experimental planchets, missing or distorted mint marks that shouldn't exist on modern quarters, and even alignment errors where the reverse design appears rotated far beyond acceptable tolerances. And while each of these errors alone can add thousands or tens of thousands in value, the coins that ignite million-dollar conversations are the ones that combine multiple anomalies in a single strike, creating a numismatic unicorn that collectors dream of but rarely see. Imagine a quarter that appears normal at first glance, Washington's portrait crisp, the park design clean, but under proper lighting reveals doubled lettering, ghost images along the rim, an unusual weight inconsistent with standard clad composition, and a surface texture that suggests it was struck during a brief experimental phase at the mint. And now imagine that coin authenticated, graded at an exceptionally high level, and backed by documentation tying it to the chaotic early months of 2020. That's where the magic happens and where values leap from face value to figures that can change a life. Auction history plays a massive role here because collectors don't just buy coins, they buy precedent. And while no public auction has yet openly finalized at the full 20 million figure, private offers, insurance valuations, and whispered negotiations among elite collectors have pushed the theoretical ceiling to that level, especially for a perfect condition example with multiple confirmed errors. And this is exactly how legendary coins begin, not with a bang, but with quiet conversations. Behind closed doors, the same way other iconic modern rarities once did before exploding into the mainstream. What makes the 2020p quarter dollar even more fascinating is how accessible it still feels, because unlike ancient gold or early silver, this is a coin that was in pockets, cash registers, vending machines, and coin jars just a few years ago, meaning the psychological pull is enormous. People know they could have touched one, spent one, or even still have one without realizing it, and that thought alone keeps viewers watching, searching, and hoping, which is why you should absolutely stay until the end, because the next coin in this series adds another layer of intrigue that makes this one feel like just the opening act. Collectors chase this quarter not just for its errors, but for what it represents, a modern anomaly, proof that even in an age of advanced technology, human systems can still produce accidental masterpieces, and the Philadelphia Mint's role adds prestige, as P-Mint coins are often scrutinized more heavily due to their volume and historical importance, making any deviation from perfection stand out dramatically. And when one of those deviations aligns with a major historical year like 2020, the narrative becomes irresistible. There are already stories circulating of everyday people finding unusual 2020 quarters, noticing something off, and sending them for grading only to discover significant premiums. And while most won't hit the multimillion-dollar jackpot, the existence of even one extreme outlier keeps the dream alive and fuels demand across the entire category. And demand is the engine that drives prices into the stratosphere. Condition is everything here, because a coin with these errors in circulated condition may be worth thousands, but the same coin preserved in near-perfect or mint-state condition becomes exponentially rarer. And when you factor in third-party grading, population reports, and collector rivalry, you begin to understand how numbers like 20 million even enter the conversation, especially when a coin becomes the best-known or finest example of its kind. The storytelling doesn't stop there, because some experts believe a tiny batch of experimental planchets were tested briefly in 2020, possibly to evaluate alternative metal compositions during supply chain disruptions. And if even one 2020p quarter was struck on such a planchet and escaped detection, it would instantly become one of the most important modern U.S. coins ever discovered, the kind of piece museums would fight private collectors for. And that's another reason you need to keep watching, because the next coin we're going to explore carries its own mysterious mint story that may rival or even surpass this one in shock value. What keeps people hooked is the idea that this coin doesn't look special. There's no gold shine, no ancient date, nothing that screams fortune. And that's exactly why most people would spend it without a second thought, unknowingly letting a potential life-changing object pass through their hands. And that fear of missing out is very real, because everyday coins are exchanged without inspection, and every day the possibility exists that something extraordinary is overlooked. As the market continues to evolve, modern rarities like the 2020p quarter dollar are gaining respect, especially among younger collectors who see these coins as attainable legends. And as more stories emerge, more examples are examined, and more anomalies are confirmed, the spotlight only grows brighter, pulling prices and attention upward in a way that feels unstoppable. So before you look away, remember that this is just the beginning, because if the idea of a 2020p quarter dollar reaching unimaginable heights already has your mind racing, the next coin in our sequence, another 2020 quarter from a different mint, carries a twist that could completely change how you look at your pocket change forever. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next 2001 quarter dollar to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? And what if that exact possibility centered around a coin you've seen 1,000 times without ever giving it a second glance? The 2001p Washington quarter dollar, a coin so ordinary in appearance that most people wouldn't bend down to pick it up off the sidewalk, yet so extraordinary in the right condition that collectors have whispered about it in stunned disbelief for years. Because hidden within this seemingly common piece of modern American currency is a story of minting chaos, microscopic mistakes, and a few jaw-dropping discoveries that have pushed its value into territory most people associate with lottery tickets or tech startups rather than spare change. And before you dismiss this as another exaggerated coin myth, stay with me, because the deeper you go into the 2001 P quarter story, the more unsettling it becomes to realize how easily a life-changing fortune could slip through your fingers unnoticed. Within the first moments of this story, let's address the number that makes collectors' hearts race and skeptics sit up straight, because under perfect storm conditions of rarity, mint error, and elite-grade preservation, a 2001 P quarter dollar has been estimated and reportedly valued at up to $2 million in private collector circles and elite auction speculation, a figure that sounds impossible until you understand how such an outcome could even exist for a modern quarter. And I want you to stick with me all the way to the end of this journey, because not only will you understand exactly why this coin can reach such staggering heights, but I'll also tease what's coming next, including another 2001 quarter from a different mint that carries its own unbelievable secrets. And trust me, you don't want to miss how these coins connect in ways most people never consider. To understand the 2001 P quarter dollar, we have to travel back to the early 2000s, a time when the US Mint was operating at a relentless pace, fueled by the wildly popular 50-state quarters program, which had turned everyday Americans into casual coin collectors overnight, and the Philadelphia Mint, marked by the small but crucial P mint mark, was striking hundreds of millions of quarters to meet unprecedented demand. And when speed, volume, and human-operated machinery collide, history shows us that perfection becomes optional while mistakes become inevitable. The standard 2001 P Washington quarter features George Washington's familiar profile on the obverse, dignified and unchanged, while the reverse design depended on the state being honored that year. But beneath that familiar imagery lies the real story, because among the mountains of normal strikes emerged a tiny fraction of coins that suffered from dramatic minting anomalies, including off-center strikes, misaligned dies, incomplete clad layers, and even the most coveted of all modern errors, double die obverse and reverses so subtle that only trained eyes initially noticed them, yet so profound under magnification that they transformed a 25-cent piece into a numismatic anomaly. One of the most sensational varieties rumored among high-end collectors involves a 2001 P quarter struck on an improperly bonded planchet, where the copper core and nickel-clad layers failed to fuse correctly, creating a coin with abnormal weight, strange coloration, and acoustic properties that immediately set it apart. And when such a coin is paired with an ultra-sharp strike and near-perfect surfaces graded at the very top of the Sheldon scale, you begin to understand how values can skyrocket beyond what logic alone would suggest. Collectors chase these coins not because they are old, but because they represent frozen moments of industrial failure, tangible evidence that even the most advanced minting operations are vulnerable to error, and the rarer and more visually dramatic the error, the more intense the competition becomes, with wealthy collectors often battling privately, driving prices into the stratosphere without ever making headlines. Stories circulate within the numismatic community of a 2001 P quarter pulled from a bankroll by a vigilant collector who noticed a slightly warped rim and unusual sheen, only to later discover under professional examination that the coin exhibited a rare multi-strike error combined with die rotation, a combination so scarce that fewer than a handful are believed to exist. And while most examples sell for far less, the finest known specimen, preserved in immaculate condition and authenticated by top grading services, became the benchmark that fueled the $2 million valuation whispered about at elite conventions and behind closed auction doors. What makes this even more haunting is the fact that these quarters were released into general circulation, meaning they passed through vending machines, cash registers, and pockets without ceremony, and countless examples were almost certainly spent, damaged, or discarded before anyone realized what they were holding, which raises the chilling possibility that undiscovered treasures could still be hiding in old change jars, inherited collections, or forgotten dresser drawers right now. Auction history for high-grade modern era quarters is a lesson in escalation, with early examples selling for modest sums before awareness spread, leading to exponential jumps in value as collectors realized just how few top-tier specimens existed, and the 2001 P quarter sits at the crossroads of modern abundance and microscopic rarity, a paradox that fuels its legend. Adding to the intrigue is the psychological factor, because many collectors initially dismissed modern quarters as unworthy of serious attention, allowing rare pieces to slip through the cracks, and it was only years later, when population reports revealed shockingly low numbers of certain error varieties in top condition, that the scramble began, transforming what was once pocket change into a battlefield of egos, expertise, and enormous financial stakes. Imagine the tension of a private sale where two collectors know that only one coin meets the criteria they both demand: flawless surfaces, dramatic error, Philadelphia mint origin, and pristine provenance. And suddenly $2 million no longer sounds outrageous but inevitable. A price paid not just for metal, but for exclusivity and the thrill of owning something almost no one else can. As you listen to this, I want you to keep one thought in your mind, because we're only at the beginning of the story arc, and the next coin we'll dive into carries a different mint mark, a different path into circulation, and a different kind of mystery that could make everything you think you know about modern US quarters feel incomplete. So stay with me, because missing the next chapter would be like leaving a movie before the final twist. The emotional pull of the 2001 P quarter isn't just about money. It's about the idea that history doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it whispers, hiding in the most ordinary objects, waiting for someone curious enough to listen, and that's why collectors obsess over this coin, because it represents the ultimate what-if scenario. What if you already touched something priceless and never knew it? What if your next handful of change contains a similar secret? And what if the only difference between an average day and a life-altering discovery is knowledge? As we bring this chapter to a close, remember that this Philadelphia minted quarter is only one piece of a larger puzzle. And if you thought a 2001 P quarter with the right errors could be shocking, the next coin in this sequence, next 2001 D quarter dollar, carries its own unbelievable story that might just eclipse everything you've heard so far. So don't go anywhere, because the next revelation is where this journey truly begins.